and we'll see how that's totally different. Hello, welcome to the Believe Show. I'm thrilled that we're here today with Rebecca Arora. Hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
Very good. I'm going to tell people a little bit about you, and as I do, I'm going to show your website, which is here at Access Alignment. And so here are the things that you should know about Rebecca before we start. Rebecca is an executive coach. She coaches founders and senior leaders in technology, where intelligent products and people touch and transform humanity. That's her sweet spot. That's what she does the most. Hello and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for creating this platform so many different people share. I've learned a ton from the previous episodes, so it's a treat. It's a treat and a privilege to be here.
Delighted to hear that. Rebecca, what is a situation that you've run into when you're coaching leaders and senior leaders specifically? What's something that you have heard them be saying to you, whether recently or just overall?
This is something that I've seen across the board with leaders and really anyone. There's this cycle of perpetual busyness. I mean, it can happen even in, oh, I'd love to do that, but I'm busy. So there's a trap that we can fall into of being too busy over time. And when you are too busy, and as I see this in leaders, the cost of that is on the strategic, more thoughtful leadership and having that chance to, sit back, think about what you want to do and the impact, and then move forward from there. So today's conversation is about how to be more thoughtful and really disrupt that pattern of busyness.
I am completely in agreement with you, especially with senior leaders, the number of meetings that they need to go to, the responsibilities that are on their shoulders. It's just how do they have time to sort of get above it all and figure out what priorities are and things like that. Completely agree with you.
Yeah, and there's nothing, I mean, our society will perpetuate this. We almost become conditioned to, it's like, oh, if I'm not busy, then is what I'm doing even important, or am I important? So there are plenty of reasons why. I mean, even our technology, as wonderful as it is, also perpetuates this cycle of being busy and going down a rabbit hole that may not be the most clarifying or productive for you.
So, Rebecca, when you've worked with senior leaders and you've been working as a partner and executive coach with them, what are some of the things that they've tried but that haven't really helped them with this busyness situation?
Well, I think the biggest impediment is a lack of, it's like they forget because they fall into the pattern, and we're wired for this. Even in our DNA, we're not in our DNA, our biology is we like repetition. So unless you are conscious enough to interrupt and stop the pattern, you will just fall into it, and people will want your time. People are going to struggle to get on your calendar. So unless you're being super deliberate, there's nothing that will prohibit this pattern from continuing.
So what you're saying makes me think of just all of us as little gerbils on wheels, and we're doing the same thing.
Exactly. So we're either the gerbil on the wheel, and in some cases, I love that metaphor, Senia, because as you do that, and in many ways, we go faster and faster. And so the faster and faster we go, it's like the more tunnel vision that we have. So to pause and to actually give yourself the permission to step back, that's really where it begins.
Could you tell us what is a tool or a technique that you bring to leaders who are in this, just for sake of discussion, I'll call, who are in this busyness trap?
Well, let me step back even a step further. Part of, because I think if you don't know the cost of this, so there's the perpetuation and the busyness cycle and the blinders. So it may seem like you're focused, it may seem like you're getting something done, but the indicators that it's not working is mistakes are happening, communications are breaking down. So you may think that you've said something and the message is super clear, but then so and so down the road didn't get it, or so things start going awry. It could be that the impact that you want to have is not actually landing, and people aren't aren't fully getting what you're trying to do. So the this busyness cycle is a detriment for all of those reasons. Plus, especially these days, there's the pile on of stress and uh, that never ending, like, oh my gosh, I have to get this done. So anxiety increases, and even those people that I know that are battling self doubt and feel like they lack confidence. Um, can really benefit from paying attention to the busyness trap and that cycle. So I don't know that I answered your question though. So back to your question
So
was how do they stop it?
yeah, so here's what I'm saying, hearing you say actually is almost like they need to know that it's coming at a cost before they get ready to stop it.
Well, sure, because what if we are in fact as humans wired to create these patterns? When you have and you're in a cycle and you follow a pattern, in many ways it makes your life easier. So, oh, right, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. I keep this going. So there's not necessarily going to be a signal unless there's a major breakdown in what's happening in your leadership. So it would be nice to get to this before something breaks and before you have to repair a conversation breakdown or a project that didn't go the way that you wanted it to go. So, yeah.
So what should leaders do?
So I love that question. Leaders really need to, again, it starts with the permission. So saying, oh, wait, there's a cost. So there's also a payoff. There's a benefit to being more strategic. And what does that look like?
Mhm.
And um, it can be as simple as, so interrupt this cycle. And it can start with your calendar. That's the most basic, and where your time goes. So if you haven't already, and most of the leaders that I've worked with have taken a hard look at their schedule and said, okay, right, is this working for me? Is my schedule calibrated so that I'm getting the most out of my conversations when I have them? And maybe I actually need less time but can get more done if I'm more thoughtful at the beginning. So um
And that makes sense. So what you're saying is, look, if you are feeling that way, whether it's the actual costs, like I had put it up before, but mistakes that you're making or communications breakdowns or the impact is lower, or you're feeling, it almost sounds like internal markers, anxiety or stress. If you're feeling all of those, one of the first places to start is the calendar.
Absolutely. You can start with the calendar, but you can start anytime. Before we hopped on and went live, Senia, you and I were talking about, so I'm guilty of getting super serious. And so I noticed just a moment ago, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm getting serious again. So I started to laugh at myself. And the reason I'm sharing that is you don't necessarily no one has to know that that's what you're doing, but I'm actually interrupting myself mid sentence, mid conversation, and say, oh, wait, oh, here I go. I'm getting serious again. So it can be as simple as that. This doesn't have to be like your full force plan, but you can amp it up to, yeah, being much more strategic with your calendar and schedule.
How do you teach leaders to start to interrupt themselves?
Well, I will often, because we're having one-on-one conversations and coaching, I will often gently interrupt my clients. Hey, or wait, I noticed when you said that, your facial expressions didn't quite match what you said. Tell me more about that. So there will be interruptions that a person can do with you, someone that you trust, and someone that is looking out for your best interests. So that can be a starting point. In one case, uh, with a leader, it's I will often ask leaders, and I'm sure Senia, you'll appreciate this, with focusing on the positive. What is going well? And it's amazing how often people will quickly go into all the things that aren't going well and the problems that they're trying to solve for. And I'll interrupt and say, that's wonderful. Did you notice that I asked you what's going well? And now you're telling me all the things that are not going so well. So that's an example of it. And when it's brought to your attention over time, clients will say, oh, right, I'm talking about the negative again. So the interrupting, it takes something, but sometimes you don't even notice it's happening unless someone else brings it to your attention.
So you've given a couple of examples that I think are real value adds for people because they're already in a coaching relationship where they trust you. And you're saying sometimes you'll interrupt just in the middle of noticing something about how they're answering. Or if they're not quite answering the question that you're asking, like a positively focused question, which sometimes leaders just have issues with doing things like bragging or saying what's going well because leaders are so good at solving problems. So here's what I'm hearing you say. This is a long way of saying, I'm hearing you say that you have found at least a couple of situations in which you can help others by interrupting them.
Sure, that there's a positive interruption. This is not a, oh, wait, stop, I'm going to talk over you interruption. That in some ways, this is a beautiful way to disrupt yourself. And I hesitate from saying disrupt because I think it has a negative connotation. It's not that what we're doing is bad per se, but it's like, oh, right, I'm on a track. Do I want to be on this track? Like I'm following if it were a record, for anyone who knows what a record, I'm just teasing. But when you play a record, there are grooves in a record. And if we're not careful, we'll just stay in the same groove. But that groove in and of itself can be the trap where you're somewhat in the trench of that groove. And so interrupting is the opportunity to kind of skip to the next and create a new groove, um, in neuropsychology, there's what happens in your brain with neurons and the how they fire. And if you want to create new neural pathways, excuse me, you'll have to actually interrupt or shift from what you're perpetually doing.
How can somebody learn to interrupt themselves?
Um, well, it's happening all the time already. If you think about notifications on whatever devices, those actually are interruptions. It's about finding interruptions that serve you and move you in the direction that you want to go versus ones that are not necessarily the most productive or in your best interest.
So that makes me think of some that people have told me about, like when their Apple Watch beeps to stand up once an hour, or people who make an appointment with themselves. I have to text a friend at least once today. And so that randomly comes up on their phone. What
Yes.
are other examples? What are positive interruptions of yourself?
There can be, it could be a Post-it note that you put on your computer somewhere, and it says, "Right, that was funny, laugh," or something that is a visual reminder. Certainly, it could be as simple as you said, Senia, the appointments in your calendar that are those reminders. It could be you tell a friend or a colleague, hey, this is something that I'm looking to do. Would you bring that up? So there are ways in the beginning, if you think of any new habit that you're starting, think of the ways that you were able to put that into place. And the same applies here.
How did you come to this idea that interrupting yourself is valuable?
For me, I think it was, there were multiple moments, when you have an aha, but then it doesn't fully sink in, and then you have another aha, and it's like, oh, right, that's a really important piece. So there are many of those aha moments. I mean, for me, I've had a meditation practice and trained in a Zen dojo where um, so much of the power of meditation is you're sitting and you're breathing, but you're watching your mind, and you'll focus on the pain or you'll focus on another conversation. So meditation's a great way because you're forced to sit still, that over time you actually start to interrupt yourself. And there could be the triggers of pain, like, ow, my knee really hurts as I'm sitting still. It could be it could be the jiki that walks around. It's going to hit you with a stick to wake up, but it doesn't have to be that severe. It could literally be oh gosh, now I lost my other example of it, another aha, but that's okay.
But,
Um,
but you're saying within meditation, you can get triggered. It sounds like both to come back to the meditative state and also to get out of it.
sure. And it's when you practice more and more paying attention, it's you start to notice these patterns and you can start to notice trends. And the more that you're being an observer watching, so it's not just that I'm having this conversation with you, but I'm also observing that I'm it sounds a little crazy, but there's you can catch it. And then, oh wait, like right now, if I'm sitting and I'm talking to you, and I might be right now, I'm leaning forward, and then I start to feel a tension in my back. So, oh, that's an indicator. And then it reminds me, oh, I need to sit up, take a deep breath, smile. So that's an example of where uh, a pain or a sensation can be a way to interrupt. It becomes the invitation. It could say, oh man, now I'm going down and I have this terrible pain. Or it's like, oh right, sit up straight, take a breath, pause.
This, what you just said about how you're observing yourself, I'm noticing even just for myself. Let's say I walk out of today, Rebecca, and I say, I'm going to do this. I'm completely sold. I feel like there's something that I'm both being the author and the editor at the same time. I'm, for example, speaking with you, but also thinking, should I move my hands here? And then I look at my own screen rather than looking at you for a moment. And maybe that's okay. But I just wonder about that dichotomy of being in the moment and also evaluating the moment. Can you speak to that a little?
Yeah, I love that you caught that and are spelling that out. That I think that that is really the greatest advantage that you can have when you can stop just being in the cycle, again, being in the groove of the author, but simultaneously, because we have really beautiful, complex minds, we can actually both have the conversation. We do this all the time. I'm having a conversation, but my mind is elsewhere. You could let that happen, or you could, with the mind that's elsewhere, actually say, wow, I'm watching this happening. Interesting. So you're harnessing what you're already doing. You're just, yeah, using it to your advantage.
You know, this reminds me when we first started doing this series. I don't know why, but I felt that everybody was working from home and everybody was likely sitting at their desk. So before I would start the formal segment, I sometimes just did kind of like stretch this way or stretch that way. And I feel like some of what you're talking about is a little bit about us getting out of our, I don't want to say our rut, or I like how you said it, our groove, but getting out of our routine in a way that helps us.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's where, because as leaders, what got you here won't necessarily get you there to the next place. And many times we get stuck, we plateau, and we're not quite sure, what do I need to do next? So if you challenge yourself to interrupt yourself, to be this, I love again your example, author and editor at the same time, and really evaluate your patterns. Is this an interruption that serves me, or is this just a distraction that's taking me down a rabbit hole I don't need to go?
I don't know if I can type fast enough, but I really like both of your terms of, is this an interruption that serves me? Yeah, here you go. And the idea of positive interruption. So something that's somehow adding a positive to your own life when you're doing it or helping someone else do it, a close colleague. So this positive interruption, this interruption that serves me. I see what you're saying. That's clear. Yeah. Rebecca, our three ending questions. One is, if somebody has been with us today and they sort of want to get, what is the crux of Rebecca's suggestion for a leader who is too busy? How would you explain that to people?
My suggestion, or my um, parting invitation, would be to spend more time being reflective rather than reactive. So you will have to take the initiative to do this. Nothing else is necessarily going to set that up for you. So, however it looks, if it means starting the beginning of your week with a chunk or the end or every day, whatever it is, being more reflective overall helps you be more strategic and thoughtful. And it will help you avoid the consequences of being busy and just getting stuff done
Yeah. Yeah.
in not the best ways.
What did you say?
Execution, but yeah,
What did you say about not the best ways?
getting things done in a productive way is great. So it's not that being busy in and of itself is
Mhm.
bad.
Mhm.
It's just being busy when it doesn't always serve you.
When it doesn't help you. And could you, just in summary, our second to last question, could you summarize what interrupting yourself means to you?
Interrupting yourself means being curious, catching yourself. Right, I'm doing this thing. Oh my gosh, I'm doubting myself. I don't have to do that. I'm going to do something else. So interrupt is like changing the channel on a radio station, change the dial. You're doing one thing, interrupt it. That it may not be the best use of your time.
Thank you. And our closing question, if you could snap your fingers and almost everyone in the world were to take some action, what would you want that to be?
For them to be kinder, gentler with themselves. And I find that when people are that, then it's far easier to be gentler, kinder to everyone else.
Oh, I hear you. Yeah. May we all take Rebecca's advice and start by being kinder, gentler to ourselves and let that spread throughout us.
Xenia, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure connecting with you, and for everyone here, thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you so much. This has been Rebecca Arora. Thank you, everyone. See you tomorrow.